Hello, friends, and welcome to I Know I Belong When, a podcast where bold voices, curious stories, and authentic impact amplify knowing that you are invited, seen, heard, and needed. I am your host, Christopher Bylone. This is more than a conversation. It is a movement, a mirror, a megaphone, one where raw truth meets radical hope. Welcome back to the show. Today's guest is a force for good in the world of business, a culture master, and a kindness catalyst who has redefined what it means to lead with heart. Marissa Andrada is the powerhouse behind some of the most transformative people strategies in corporate America. From Chipotle to Starbucks to Kate Spade, she has helped iconic brands unlock the full potential of their people while fueling growth and purpose. Now she is disrupting the way companies approach well-being by connecting humankind through our pets as the Chief Culture Officer at WUF World. As a speaker, advisor, and thought leader, Marissa partners with corporate executives to co-create values-driven cultures where equity, inclusion, and belonging are not just goals, they are daily practices. Her mantra, always lead with kindness and treat people the way they want to be treated, is more than a philosophy. It is a call to action for leaders everywhere. In this episode, we are going to explore how Marissa builds cultures where everyone thrives, why kindness is a strategic advantage, and what it takes to lead with purpose in today's world. Let us dive in. Marissa, welcome to I Know I Belong When.
Oh my goodness. Christopher, are you sure you were talking about me in that intro?
Yes.
That seems like a big person.
You are a big person.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm so super excited to be part of this show and part of this movement. Frankly, when I met you, a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, you embody that. So it's fun to actually talk shop, if you want to call it shop, like how we roll in life together on your show. I'm excited to be here.
No, it's great. And thank you for being part of this. This means so much to me. So let's get started. Is there anything that you would like to add beyond the bio that we shared to help listeners get a deeper connection to who you are and the stories you're about to share?
Yeah, I always love to share kind of my upbringing. That's what defines me and my values and how I stand in them. I'm always proud to say that it's like Teresa with an M, Marissa. I know it looks like it's spelled like Marissa, but my parents were immigrants to this country. They met here. They're both from the Philippines. And growing up, I was always Marissa, the rolling R. And then once I went to school, every teacher would do roll call and they would say Marissa. And I would be like, no, it's Marissa. I'd have to remind them. And so that says a lot. I think I was chatting with someone new that I've been working with over the last 6 months, and she introduced me to another company where I had a speaking engagement, and she wanted to get to know me and, of course, called me Marissa when she first met me. And I just kind of said, oh, it's Marissa. And she goes, I bet you do that all the time. I'm like, don't worry about it at all. Although I believe you need to call people by their full name. Right, Christopher? If
Yes.
I think about that. And she said, how did you learn early on, if that was first grade when you started correcting teachers how to say your name, that is early on speaking truth to power. And
Yes.
I share that story with you very early on because, again, for me, pursuing the career that I have had over the past 30 years, I believe that my purpose in life is always to be profoundly and joyfully connecting people to one another in service to creating opportunity. And it's personal to me because when we grew up in East LA, we had no relatives. I think my dad followed his oldest sister and married someone who could have been our grandfather. We used to call him Lolo, and then we called her Auntie. And then on my mom's side, she brought every one of her sisters over from the Philippines who then left their family behind. They would come live with us, get a job, get their feet on the ground, and get their own place before they send their family back. And the only places that would hire my relatives were fast food, retail, entry-level, minimum wage jobs. And so I guess it's not a surprise. And I would watch them make their way and create opportunity in this land of opportunity for a new country that they became a part of. And I guess it's not a surprise in the various brands where I've had the chance to serve in the role of HR or in the role of chief people role. Not a surprise that while I did not become this doctor that my parents wanted me to be, because they thought that was the definition of success in the US, instead I became like this human resources business person, which they never quite understood. But I think they do now. I think it's because they completely relate to these iconic American brands. So like, well, if you're not going to be a doctor, we at least know these brands. But I guess it's no surprise that I've ended up in HR, and having served over 1 million frontline employees, it's personal to me. It's personal to me. I say that because however people want to coin the phrase today, back then it was EEO, 2 years ago, diversity was so in vogue, and now should be saying that word, and everyone's scrubbing it from their language. I believe that if a company has it at their core, in their purpose and values, if that's who they are, you shouldn't have to change your values. And so I think for me, bringing it back to me, always having a clear point of view of who I am and where I came from, and standing in that, whether it's navigating life as a child or navigating career life in the professional environment where as well as I do, people aren't as open to embrace different styles, right? And so, but I feel like I've been a pioneer, whether it's a female joining a senior leadership team and being the only female and or the only person of color, it just is what it is. But I think standing in my values and knowing who I am and never giving up on that, I think is really important. So anyway, that's what I would add to the intro, and what people should know about me. It is about profoundly and joyfully connecting people to one another in service to creating opportunity, because that's personal to me. It's my family story.
Yeah, and it really creates belonging for somebody, right? And
absolutely.
And so wanted to dive in on just a little bit more to your background. And so what is the one truth you wish people knew about you before they started working with you?
Oh, wow. The one truth that people should know about me before they started working with me. I mean, what you see is what you get. And what I mean by that is, I try and speak and break it down, like talk in normal language instead of jargon. People would expect I come in with all these fancy words. There's a lesson behind that. And what I've learned is you can also have fun and be all about business at the same time. Really quickly, and I don't know if this is especially true for women that I've worked with. I won't say which organization. I've worked in a lot of large ones. And if I wasn't their manager yet, like I've moved around in, different companies. And I remember, and this is a consistent theme, I'll tell it two ways. One was a woman who kind of worked peripherally in another function. And then when I moved into the global role for this one company, she ended up reporting to me. And she said this to me in probably our second or third kind of team meetings. I had weekly meetings. And then, we had a one-on-one right after that. And she said, gosh, Marissa, she's like, you're for real. I go, well, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, I thought, you show up with all this energy, the way you dress, et cetera, and the way you talk. I thought this was all for show. And then she said, but you actually really do know your stuff and you're really smart. So I'm not sure if people think I'm this persona with no, all blow and no go. Come on. I wish people would know that there is a lifetime of experiences, not only work-wise, but life-wise as well. I live in both to be able to be the most effective that I can be in serving an organization.
If we want to talk about creating cultures of belonging where people can be their bold, authentic self, I mean, you are the walking poster child of that, right? So, I mean, that's the thing that probably attracted me to you, right away when we met on the streets of New York City.
Oh, that's right. At our Krispy Kreme.
It was week 3 that I was at Krispy Kreme, and we were at the Times Square shop and walking over to NASDAQ, and that was how our relationship started, right? And you just being Marissa, and I was like, this is a person I need to get to know. So switching conversation a little bit.
Yeah.
Going back to our names, right? You alluded to it. You mentioned Christopher, and as people know, I am always Christopher, never Chris.
Yep.
So what does your name mean to you, and how has it shaped your leadership journey?
Oh my gosh. Well, my name means to me, if I am quite literal, and I think about why my parents named each one of us, I have an older brother and a younger brother. My full name is Marissa Jane Andrada. And I think they just love the name Marissa because it was representative of their culture. So if you do 23andMe, my dad's family was living in the Locos Norte, which is up in the mountains in the Philippines. My mom, her maiden name was Ventura. But if you trace all of that, it goes back to like Portugal and when Magellan was cruising around the world and how they ended up in the Philippines. And so I proudly have my name. It's Marissa Jane. Marissa is very much a Spanish Filipino name. Jane represents Joan of Arc, which I grew up Catholic, and my mom really thought that I could be representative of that, and maybe, and then Andrada is my dad's name. Even when I got married, I've kept my last name because I am so proud of really who I am and where I came from. I mean, the fact that my parents met each other here, created their own family, like it makes me feel so proud to not hide behind or Americanize my name. Like some people might change their name and I'm all into it. Marissa Andrada, how can be there can be another one, right? And to me, it's just a reminder of where I grew up, and how my parents raised me. And I think that's what makes me so proud to represent the Andradas and the Venturas, and the path that I've walked in life, that it would make my parents proud. I mean, it's really that. If I go all the way back to child psychology, it is about knowing the sacrifices they made and live here in America, the land of opportunity. And so take advantage of that, and don't be afraid. I remember this too, like we would leave first school. I didn't go to preschool. I went to kindergarten in East LA, and then we ended up moving after then. And my mom would always say, and my dad too, only speak English when you leave the house, because we want people to treat you with respect, because they got it. Like they tried to teach me early on that people are mean when you don't look or sound like them, and also treat people with respect, right? The way that you want to be respected, treat them the way they want to be respected, which is probably where I got the whole platinum rule, right? Treat people the way they want to be treated. So the name is very much, now that my dad has since passed, it's really about honoring him and honoring my family. And that I have that responsibility to act with integrity to that name. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, one, learned something new today. Jane is your middle name. I did not know that before, and that's really cool. And just the power behind each of those names is just phenomenal and really moving. And so thank you for sharing and being a little bit vulnerable. So moving into the moment of belonging, can you share a defining story, a turning point when you knew I belonged here? And how did that moment influence your approach to building inclusive cultures and especially championing the platinum rule?
Oh my gosh. Well, I can think about early in my career where I didn't belong. Maybe we'll share that story for later. Well, I won't tell the whole story, but I was part of an organization where they had a class for high potential minorities. It's called Efficacy for Minority Professionals. Very large company, and if you ever want to be a CHRO someday, go work there for a decade or two and then become a CHRO. And I remember this class that they brought me to was around efficacy for minority professionals, and they taught us, here's what a success profile looks like, here's how you speak, here's how you dress, which was so inauthentic to me. But I also thought, I've only been here 6 months. There's so much that I could learn from a strategic business HR standpoint that will actually carry me in my career, which it has. So it's kind of like live that for a little bit and then move on. And I've always said I would never work for another large company again. And then my family says you've only ever worked for large companies, right? But I think the difference is strong founder, right? A strong founder. If I went to Universal Studios for the longest time, Ron Meyer was one of the founders of CAA, and then he became the president and COO of Universal Studios. And eventually I had the chance to go work for him. But it was in that moment that there was another leader by the name of Mark Hallisey. I always attribute a lot of my confidence really to Mark. And what I loved about Mark, and this is where I felt like I truly belonged, where actually everyone around me gave me indicators of that. But really it started with Mark, and he was like the VP HR development. And I eventually got to report to him about halfway through my career at Universal Studios. I was there for 6 years. And what I loved about Mark is that what you see is what you get with him. Not unlike how I show up now. Like, he was openly gay. I will say that. I know it's entertainment, but he was to the point where he would reference Tom, his husband. He also spoke freely and used expletives when he thought he needed to, but still professional,
Right.
And what I found out is that his old assistant, which then when he got promoted and went to kind of the new ownership of the company of Universal, I got his assistant, and she said, Mark had all the time in the world for you because you always brought him, everything, meaning here's what's going on. I love your advice. But I felt like that was the first place I belonged because he was a leader when I told him I needed to take some time off. I just bought this new house and I needed the time to go move. And he then the day before, when I had to remind him, hey, I'm moving. And he goes, well, what time do you want me and Tom to show up? And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? This is my boss, right?
Right.
At Universal Studios. And he and Tom showed up to my house to literally help me move boxes into the U-Haul. And then, we all unloaded the U-Haul and then went out for drinks afterwards. And I tell you, I belonged then because I felt I had the empowerment and the permission to be exactly who I am. I think about back then, even asking for time off, which I'm such a nerd. I hated taking time off because then I felt like, well, I didn't have a work ethic and, people would see me as slacking. But what I appreciated about Mark is that he really saw me as the whole person. Why I felt like I belonged, not only, the studious, work hard person inside the company, but he also recognized I was a human being and that I needed to have a life, right? And that by having that fulfillment in life will actually recharge you for the hard work that you're bringing in to this company every day. And so I think in the time that I worked with him, I wish that I had met him 7 years sooner, because I was in my late 20s by the time I met him. And I thought, gosh, I wonder how much further I would be in life if I really believed in myself in the way he does,
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean about feeling like belonging. And the environment around me, people saw that, and they also saw that I was likely trusted by the leader, that everyone kind of welcomed my ideas. And because I embrace their ideas too, it's not a one-way situation. But that's one of the first times I felt like I belonged, because it was about embracing and supporting the whole person, not just the Marissa, the director of whatever, the VP of whatever, showing up to work, but it's Marissa who also has a life and has other interests outside of work.
Well, he was modeling the way, right? He was, if we want people to show up, no matter what community they're in, workplace, family, your church, you're going to need people who model the way of the culture, right? You can't, culture just doesn't show up, right? It's an active thing you need to mature. And so we need people who are going to model the way. And Mark sounds like he was like, guess what? I am my bold, authentic self, and I want everybody around me to be my bold, authentic self, right? And so that's our responsibility as leaders, to make sure that, hey, guess what? We're going to help charge the path forward, right? Even if it's a path uncharted already, so that the folks who are coming behind us or walking alongside of us don't have to necessarily always experience the trials and tribulations we do. You made a reference to Mark being gay, and I'm also a gay man, as people know. And one of the things I joke about is that if you can't figure out I'm a gay man within the first 5 minutes of talking to me, you don't need to know, right?
Right. Right. I think just Mark was very open about it. That's what I appreciated about him, that I can also be open to my full self instead of Marissa with the professional hat on. Although I still do like to have a lot of fun, even when I'm working. You know what I mean? Like, that's just how I am. Yeah, we have to. Yeah.
So, okay, I'm going to take us back to the conversation or the story you were telling a little bit about the moment you didn't belong.
Okay.
You knew you didn't belong there, because we can't shy away from that, right? We got to talk about the good stuff and the not so good stuff.
Yeah.
So talk about that time when you felt that you were excluded, erased, or even underestimated, and how you worked through that.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll finish telling that story. It was a Fortune 50 company back in the day. There's two places where you can go work if you want to make it in your career in business. And I remember sitting down with my manager, my leader, like probably the first 4 to 6 months. And he says, "Congratulations, Marissa, you're a high potential minority." And I thought, oh, so not a high potential leader like the programs that we run in HR for the people that we serve. Now I'm a high potential minority. Like, it was very specific. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. They're going to invest some development in me. I'm going to go to an extra class, which I told you was called Efficacy for Minority Professionals. And I remember the very beginning of the class, 4.5 days, we all flew to a city. There were like 25 of us young people of color sitting in a room who were high potential minorities. And I remember it was this black dude and this white woman standing in the front of the room with a flip chart. And he took this pen and he like had a blue pen and drew these diagonal squiggles down the flip chart. And then he took a green pen, arrow down, same direction of the stream. And he goes, "This represents a river or stream, and this represents the current." And then he took a red pen, drew it up the other way. And he said, "This is swimming upstream against the current. And this is all of you for the rest of your career. You will always be swimming upstream. People will always be against you." And I'm thinking, okay, I kind of get what you're saying, but really? Like, I'm not going to believe that people are always going to be against me. That is a weird way to like shape people and reinforce the fact that they need efficacy for minority professionals. Like, help me understand that.
Right.
And then I thought, wow, if this is what it's like to work in corporate America, because for the rest of the week, they introduce the success profile. Here's like certain vocabulary that you should be using. Here's how you dress. And I thought, I am not a Stepford either, like a Stepford wife or whatever. But again, I'd mentioned, I'm going to suck it up, because this may be one blip. Like, it was a bucket. It was 4.5 days. And I remember that was kind of the first thing. The second thing that they gave us feedback on, which I still use to this day, they were teaching us how to like perform in this zone of performance. Like, there was green on one end and there was red on one end, but there was this zone where like, this is a zone of performance. And don't forget, it's not the stimulus, it's the response. And when he explained what that meant, he said, when people come at you in your career, stand down. And I'm like, okay, what? I remember hearing that for the first time. So you're actually asking me to stand down. And it's so correlated to the interview that I should have known better when I first joined the company, who, by the way, that person's also a dear friend and mentor of mine now. But I remember hearing that and I thought, I am never going to stand down,
Right.
How I take, it's not the stimulus, it's the response. No matter how hard life is, how hard people are to you or whatever, it's all in how you choose to respond to them. And I'd rather choose grace and understanding versus jump right back on them,
Right.
or stand down and do nothing about it. Like, I want to seek to understand what is happening. So that was a gift. I think that's a kernel, but more so because we all have a choice in how we want to respond to people, and for me, it is with kindness. And we can talk about kindness later, but like being honest with people. And then the last thing they gave me feedback on, which is when I knew I didn't belong. We had this like U-shaped classroom, the name tent and all of that. You sit down and they had your name tent in a certain place. Well, there wasn't even programming at night for us to go out to dinner together. You had it kind of DIY, do it yourself. It was a pilot program. And so every day I would walk into the room, pick up my name tent, scoot over to another side of the room, put it down and ask people, "Do you mind if I squeeze in this way?" They're like, "Not at all." But I did that 4 different times. And I remember the coach at the end of the week said to me, I was going through my 360 feedback, which is also a feature of the development, but then talking about the behavior. And he said, "Marissa, when you got up and moved your name tag every day, or name tent every day, and you moved to a different side of the room, do you realize how disruptive that was?" And I said, "I didn't realize that it was disruptive. I think maybe you do." But my intention was more about, I think I learn better. I think I see things differently when I'm if I'm sitting in a different part of the room. I just experience it differently. The people around me, the perspective might feel different, etc. And so it wasn't my intention at all to disrupt the class. I really wanted to get to know more people and understand the experience from a different vantage point. And he's like,
yeah, I mean, if you were in the same spot, you're going to probably have the same people around you and the same kind of whispers happening for 4 days. No, you want to go get different perspectives. That's the whole reason that you're there, right? So,
right? Hello, having a diverse
hello.
perspective in the room, which carried through in my days, like sitting in the boardroom for a management team meeting, always selecting a different seat, because people are creatures of habit. And I
Yes.
find too, like I learn so much more and I see things differently when I sit in a different seat, if that makes sense to you, you know?
Yes, it does. It does.
So I carried that all the way through my career. But I remember when I left, I was on this quest for creating cultures of thriving where everyone can thrive, everyone can belong, because I certainly didn't feel that way in this organization. And, you know, fast forward in life, look, one of the leaders that I literally quit him too, but we're still very close. And then one of his peers, because they were like so senior in the organization, I got to know through this alumni group that I belonged to, they invited me to be a part of. I got to know one of the former leaders' families so well that they interviewed, like their kids, who were closer in age to me than I was to them, to their parents, would invite me to every wedding. So I've been to like this family's wedding. I knew the kids, etc. And I remember walking up to the church. We were in London, and Emma was marrying someone from London, hence she was in London. And I remember walking up to the church, and her father was standing out there, who I respect tremendously. He was like an SVP of org development when I left that one company. And then he's like, "Hey, Marissa, meet my college buddies. They're here too, blah, blah, blah." And they go, "Oh, did you used to work for this guy?" I'm like, "No, but I worked for a peer of his." And then Van said the nicest thing, the other mentor. He said, "Here's the deal. The company we were both at, Marissa was like probably a manager. And, you know, he goes, I was here when she left. And then her career just continued to take off after that. And she ended up here." And he goes, "And I'm still here." So for him to actually say that, I think when you find a place where it's a kinship, where you feel like your personal values are aligned with the leaders with whom you work, the company that you're a part of, that's when you thrive and, you know, can be that much more productive in your career, right? I think when you find those environments where you can feel like they support your whole self, I think that's when you can also thrive for in your career and help others do that too. So
yeah, no, really powerful, really powerful. So let's talk about kindness, right? So from your perspective, what does it mean to be kind?
I think what it means to be kind is actually to be truthful and present in the moment. And here's what I mean by that. You know how it is. I mean, you're a professional. You get it when leaders, especially, like, "Oh, I want to get rid of this person." So as long as it's not a surprise to them, you know, if there's one thing that they did so long ago, why didn't you take the time to point that out to them? You know, to be kind is to be present and timely. So if there's something where if there's a little bit of a nudge or course correction, I'll just say in work and then we'll talk about in life, then the kindest thing to do is to be honest and upfront with them in a very timely manner. Why? Right. Give them a chance to actually identify with that, and then the chance to behave differently, right? If they know what the rules of success would be, they got the feedback immediately in a timely manner. You don't need to deliver it to, you know, I've heard people use the sandwich, you know, they call it the sandwich, where you say something nice, say something mean, and then say something nice in between, and then they lose the whole thing. I think kindness is when you see the truth and you're present to it, and because you're coming from a caring place, to let people know, as hard as the messaging will be, it's not about being nice all the time, it's about being truthful and in a timely manner. That's why I say being present to it, not, well, this happened 6 months ago and now I'm angry at you for another thing and the thing you did 6 months ago. No, where was your, you know, what do you own in that you weren't kind enough to stop the conversation or reflect on the moment where truth would have helped them, you know, early on. Because now it doesn't serve anybody when you're sitting on it and, you know, upset about it for however long. And so that's what I mean by being kind. It's being present and in the moment and being truthful to people in a way that you care about them, not, you know, in a vindictive way.
Yeah, because also I think it's also about being truthful about the things that they might not know, right? You know,
they may not see it. They may not see it.
Yeah, I mean, we have a fellow colleague that likes to use the term, you have to understand the shadow that you cast,
Yeah.
Right. And one of the things that this individual had really instilled in me is understanding the shadow that I was casting in the organization, right? For the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And so, and some of the feedback that I got, while it was kind, it was truthful and hard to hear, but it was because I was not aware of the bad shadow that I was casting.
Yes. Right. And, and this leader, I know who you're talking about, has got your back, because they're like, it's coming from a good place of caring about you and your success, and if people can understand that, that's what it means to be kind, right? And present in the moment when it's happening. That's what I mean. Kind is not, hey, I'm going to be nice to you and like smiles and friendly. Okay, whatever. But it is about, if you do really care about this person, then be present with them. And how are they being experienced? Share that with them,
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about kindness in the workplace, but I really want to hear kindness in the community.
Oh my goodness. I think about, look, I mentioned earlier that growing up in our household, there was like two dialects from the Philippines, both Ilocano and Tagalog. We also had a friend of the family who stayed with us during the week, who I realized now looking back was likely an illegal immigrant from Mexico. So she also spoke Spanish, and my parents both worked. But then they said, only speak English when you leave the house because they wanted people to respect us. And I think about, I'll talk about early childhood and I'll talk about a more recent one, which really kind of burned me. But I think about as a child, I would go grocery shopping with my dad. And he, until his last days, still had a very thick accent. But if you grow up with him, or like even when my husband got to know him, you can begin to understand my dad. But I remember like being at the grocery store, and I was 9, and we'd go grocery shopping with my dad. And this is when you would write out the checks, bring your checkbook to the grocery store. I remember the checker like speaking slowly and yelling at my dad because he was under the impression that he didn't speak English, right? My dad spoke great English. He just had a really thick accent. And I remember saying to the checker, hey, you don't need to yell at my dad. He can hear you loud and clear. Also, he understands English. And I'm, as this 9-year-old, telling this cashier, you don't need to do that. And I think for me, again, fiercely protecting my family.
Right.
I'm such a daddy's girl too. Like I'm so close to my mom and dad, but like I know that I was a daddy's girl. He was always looking out for me. But I think feeling like, God, we can't even go grocery shopping, And then I think about when we moved out of a very diverse area to a better public education system in the Inland Empire, and kids made fun of me because I looked different, and they all made fun of me because I had an accent. I don't recall having an accent, but whatever. But I think about, that's a reflection of your upbringing. Sorry to say this, parents, I think kids are automatically mean if they don't know any better.
Correct.
You know what I mean? If they're not
Correct.
being told at home. I know in grade school we all learn the golden rule, treat people the way you want to be treated, We learn all of these proper social etiquette things, but unless your parents really reinforce it for you, or there's a figure in your life, in your family, that helps you understand that, it's really hard. So especially as a child growing up and being reminded that I was different, and especially when we moved to a new neighborhood where they're like, if you're going to make fun of me, at least know what race I am before you like make fun of my race, right? I think about like being called all sorts of things, whether I remember this too, being a chink for either being Chinese or a beaner for being Mexican. Like I've been named everything. And I'm like, look,
Lord.
At least identify with my right ethnicity. Okay. You know what I mean? So you just have to laugh at that as a kid, because then again, it all goes back to your upbringing. Who are the authority figures in your life that are shaping your thinking right now? So.
Yeah, I think about that. I have 2 boys, right? And thinking about, okay, so I need to make sure that they understand how to be good people, good humans in this world, right? And how are we instilling at that so that, I love when I'm out in the community, or I meet their teachers, or I just meet the parents of friends that they have, and they go, oh, your kids are, and they just lay on the grace, right? You know,
Yeah.
how awesome they are. And I go, do you live with them? Right? Right? But what it's the reflective back is this is what we've instilled in them, right?
Yes.
So they are acting in a way that we want them to, that we have instilled in them, that when we're not around to watch them, they're still doing the right thing.
That's right. That's right.
Right? And so parents, guess what? Your children are the product of you, right?
That's right.
And so, you know, racism is a learned thing.
It is.
Right? You know,
It
so
is.
if they have an ism, they've learned it from somewhere. And it is also our responsibility, parents, to, if that ism starts to creep into your home, call it out.
Yeah. Again,
Right? Call it
that's,
out.
again, being present to the moment. That's why I always think about kindness as being present in the moment, to the moment, and the information that you can share, because it's much harder later on, and it's not kind, you know, when you're sitting on this and festering over it for so long. So I think that's where that comes from. And then I'd say more recently, I won't name the organization. So I was super excited about being referred to and joining this group of, like, a women's group, I'll just call it that. And all the women in the group are either in their C-suite or retired from C-suite, and they're in, you know, board roles, pretty high-powered women. And the woman who founded it, wow, I won't even tell you where she grew up, but grew up in a very privileged life. I will just say that. I had a really crude and odious moment with her. I will say that. And for her to not have all this information, and yet, I'll even use this bold word, accusing me of doing something that I didn't do, and then telling me that I'm unethical. I'm like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? You know, and not even backing it up with anything, you know, just, oh, all these people are talking about this. And when I went to go check the facts, no one was talking about this. So I don't know what that's all about, other than, again, I think about her upbringing. I mean, I know you brought up the word racism. Look, that's a learned behavior, you know, and
Right.
I don't actually pretend to act like anybody else but me. So,
Right.
you know, and I think she's trying to create an organization where all the women show up and act like her. And so that says a lot. It reminds me of being in companies. You and I had the chance to serve in the same company in different capacities. And look, culture is a reflection of leadership, right? So I think about, how does the top roll? How do they carry themselves? That is going to be the culture that they create. And where was I? I was at another meeting where also someone said, leaders get the culture they deserve. And so if you are creating a toxic environment where people don't feel seen and heard, where you're always laying blame on others, right? When something goes wrong that maybe you had control over, you get the culture that you deserve, good and bad. You know what I mean?
If you want the culture that is positive and welcoming and exciting, and everybody finds joy to work there,
Yeah,
then that's the culture you are responsible for, that culture too, right? You know,
absolutely. So I loved it. I forgot where I was when someone said that. I'm like, I like that. I also talk about leaders, culture is a reflection of the leaders, right? At the end of the day. So it's looking at it two different ways. I think negatively, if you're feeling bad about your organization and it feels toxic, well, guess what, leaders? What is your role in that? It doesn't just happen overnight, you know?
No. Okay, so what a great way to end on making sure that our leaders understand that they get the culture that they deserve. Okay, so to bring this ship home, to wrap things up, Marissa, I'm asking everybody to finish the sentence. I know I belong when.
I know I belong when my values are aligned with the leader's values, as well as the company's values of any organization that I choose to be a part of. I know that's when I belong. We don't all have to look the same. However, who we are and what we stand for, that there's got to be like that kinship, that relationship, that affinity for similar values. And I think that's why you and I became so close, because I relate to you, friend, because you've got some really strong values, right? I know family is important to me. Family is important to you as well. You know, being inclusive, being authentic, you know, those are values that are clear to me, that I know are clear to you. And so while we all might show up differently, it is about having aligned values.
Well, Marissa, this has been an absolute pleasure. and a great reminder that belonging is not a destination, it is a practice, and it starts with listening. So friends, if you were challenged by this episode to move outside of your comfort zone, please follow the show and give a comment below on what you are going to be doing to be a champion of belonging. Thank you for listening, and know that your bold, authentic self is welcomed, valued, and loved. And until next time, remember, you belong here.